Hello, my name is Melissa and I am 35. Sometimes I feel that it is at this age that a person truly begins to understand for the first time. Life doesn't have to be a straight line. It more closely resembles a river with many quiet backwaters and unexpected turns. Until recently, I had been floating along calmly, not against the current, but without giving much thought to where it was leading. You could say I had a normal life, the kind most people consider settled. I work as a senior account manager at a trading company nestled in the city center among glass facades and noisy intersections. The job requires nerves at times, but there's never a day without movement, new faces, or challenges. It suits me. The salary is decent, I live independently, and a sense of self-confidence has become part of my morning coffee, slightly bitter but invigorating. 3 years ago, I divorced my husband, Mark. There were no screams, broken dishes, or court scandals, just fatigue. We were like two people who had been standing next to each other at a train station for too long, waiting for different trains. Our conversations became rare, our glances empty. One day, we simply realized we were already walking different paths. Thank God we had no children. Not because I don't love them, but because in that case, we would have had to hurt not only ourselves. The only thing that connected us after the divorce was the house. A small country house an hour's drive from the city. 3 bedrooms, old oaks on the property, a little over 2 acres of land, silence, and the smell of decaying leaves in autumn. Not a mansion, but a place with character, with a breath of its own. Mark gave it up immediately, saying he was more attuned to the city's hum, the crowds, the neon. So by agreement, the house went to me. At first, I decided I would sell it without regret. Why would a single woman need a house in the middle of nowhere that would stand empty 9 months a year? I imagined putting it up for sale, getting a good sum of money, and finally buying myself an apartment in the city. Modern, bright, with panoramic windows and a balcony where I could drink wine after work, looking at the evening lights. It all seemed logical, almost mathematically precise. But there's always a variable in my life that ruins any formula: my family. My parents, Janet and Robert, are in their early 60s. My father has been building things all his life. Houses, roads, sometimes, as he jokes, other people's destinies. My mother is a former teacher, still retaining the habit of asking questions and expecting honest answers. They are both lively, energetic, and importantly, convinced that they know perfectly well how my happiness should be arranged, especially when it comes to big decisions. And of course, there's Emma, my younger sister, eternally sunny, noisy, adoring life in its most crowded manifestations. She's 30, works at a boutique in the center, and is dating Trevor, a guy with kind eyes and a shy smile who seems to be perpetually searching for himself somewhere between the office and his dreams. Emma is a person of celebrations. Where she is, there's cheerful noise. Where I am, there's more often silence and a book. When I first mentioned selling the house, the family erupted with indignation, like a kettle forgotten on the stove. Mom literally exclaimed during Sunday dinner, "Melissa, you can't sell that wonderful house." I calmly put my fork down then, but a wave of irritation was already rising in my chest. She continued, agitated, with that teacherly fervor I've known since childhood. Think of all the memories we could create there. Family weekends, holidays. Just imagine. Emma, of course, chimed in. Yes, sis, it would be the perfect place for barbecues, parties for the whole family. I tried to explain that I had neither the time nor the desire to deal with a house that would sit empty. But Mom looked at me in that way only she can, softly, persistently, with that very mix of love and manipulation that always made my nerves give way. Please, Melissa, she said, reaching across the table and taking my hand. Keep the house for the family, for me. That "for me" got to me the most. Mom rarely asks for anything. She and Dad have lived modestly but honestly all their lives, and if she says those words, it really matters. I felt my carefully constructed, rational plan begin to melt, and I gave in. Instead of selling the house, I decided to keep it. I took out a mortgage for a new apartment in the city, spacious with 2 bedrooms and a modern kitchen. Fortunately, my savings allowed for a good down payment, and the monthly payments didn't seem ruinous. The apartment became my new nest, bright, cozy, full of order. Everything was at hand: work, shops, coffee shops where the barista already knows my name. The first thing I did when I finally decided to put the old house in order was to install a security system. It wasn't so much fear as an internal need to create an invisible shell around myself, like a turtle pulling into its shell. The house stood apart, far from the neighbors, hidden by trees and wind, and the silence there sometimes felt too thick, almost alive. I wanted to feel that someone, even cold electronics, was standing guard over my peace. I called in technicians. They fussed with wires and sensors for a long time, and I stood in the doorway watching them install the cameras, small, round eyes watching every corner. In the living room and hallway, by the back door, and even on the porch, tiny red lights now glowed. $3,000, a significant amount, but you always have to pay for security. I knew I would often be alone in this house, and peace of mind was worth the money. I also decided to give Mom a spare set of keys. When I handed them to her, she lit up as if she had received not just keys, but the very symbol of trust. Her eyes shone with a soft light, and in that moment, I felt I had done something right. Thus began a new chapter in the life of the house. Over the next 3 years, it became a kind of family nest, a quiet refuge where we could escape the city bustle. My parents went there on weekends. Dad would fix the fence or putter in the garden. Mom would bake her famous apple pies in the morning. Emma would bring Trevor there, first just for a couple of days, then more and more often. They would have romantic weekends, walk along the lake shore, take pictures in the old garden. On holidays, the house filled with voices. We all gathered together, my parents, me, Emma, and Trevor, sometimes Aunt Carol with her husband and Uncle Mike's kids. It smelled of roast meat, laughter, wine, and smoke from the fireplace. Those evenings were warm and full of life. I caught myself thinking that I hadn't kept this house in vain. Even though I was paying a mortgage for a city apartment I could have owned outright by now, the joy it brought the family was worth every penny spent. At work, everything was going great. The company was growing, clients were becoming regulars, and I was confidently moving up. Financial worries didn't plague me, and to some extent I felt like the center of a small universe. Everyone had their own orbit, but it still revolved around this house, around me. Meanwhile, Emma and Trevor were growing closer. It was clear that what they had was no longer just a light attachment. It was the certainty with which people look into each other's eyes, knowing they have a shared path ahead. Trevor's parents, Linda and George, came to a few of our family gatherings. Pleasant people, a bit prim, reserved, as if they always tried to maintain their posture even in conversation, but polite and well-meaning. They were different from our family, which was more straightforward and noisy, but somehow we got along. And then one Tuesday evening, as I was sitting at home after work, Mom called. Her voice was, as always, warm and businesslike at the same time. "Melissa, dear," she said, "this Friday we want to have a big family gathering at your house. Everyone will be there. Your father and I, Emma with Trevor, his parents Linda and George, Carol with Mike and their kids. Can you make it?" I looked at my calendar and sighed heavily. "Mom, I'd love to, but I have an important management meeting on Friday. I'll have to stay at the office until late." "Don't worry, dear," she said in her soft, understanding voice. "We'll handle everything ourselves. Rest if you can. Work is important. We'll manage." I thanked her and, hanging up, turned back to the TV. Thoughts of the gathering quickly dissolved. Everything was proceeding as usual until Friday morning. That day, as I was getting ready for the meeting, my phone rang. It was my boss. "Melissa, I have bad news," he said. "Both the director and his deputy have caught some virus. We'll have to postpone the meeting until next week." I exhaled with relief. Those meetings were always draining. "In that case, perhaps I can finish early today?" I asked. "Of course," he replied. "Take half a day off. It's quiet today anyway." After hanging up, I sat motionless for a few minutes. My family was probably at the house right now, this very minute, laughing, cooking, setting plates on the old oak table, and I suddenly had time. Why not go there, surprise them? The thought flared up unexpectedly and ignited a strange, youthful feeling in me, an excitement I hadn't felt in a long time. I smiled. How long had it been since I'd done anything spontaneous? I'd gather some treats, arrive without warning. They'd be delighted. I pictured my parents' faces, a surprised Emma, a confused Trevor. I quickly got dressed, went downstairs, and headed to the center. The small pastry shop I adore smelled of warm dough and chocolate. I picked out the best of everything: flaky croissants, fruit tarts, crumbly cookies, a couple of pies with wild berry filling. Sweets always bring people together. That I knew for sure. With a bag of fragrant boxes in my hand, I left the cafe and felt a light autumn wind pushing me forward, as if it, too, wanted me to go there, to the house where my family's laughter was now sounding. As I turned onto the gravel driveway, the car tires crunched softly, and the headlights pulled the familiar silhouette of the house from the darkness. The windows were shining, warm rectangles of light against the blue evening air. Several cars were parked outside: my parents' old silver Honda, Emma's tiny red Toyota, Trevor's black SUV, and a bit farther away, a couple of cars I recognized as belonging to Carol and Mike. My heart skipped a beat. It seemed everyone was really there. I took the bag of pastries from the passenger seat. The sweet smell of vanilla and butter hit my nose, and quietly closed the car door. The cold air tickled my cheeks. I walked towards the house, trying not to let my heels click on the stones. I wanted to surprise them, to see their faces when I suddenly appeared on the doorstep with desserts and a smile. The keys jingled in my pocket. I approached the front door and, listening, froze. Voices, the clinking of glasses, and laughter came from inside, that carefree, sincere laughter that fills a house with life. I involuntarily smiled. It all sounded so cozy, so homely. Slowly, trying not to let the lock creak, I inserted the key and turned it. It clicked quietly. I opened the door and stepped inside, holding my breath. The hallway smelled of roast meat, cinnamon candles, and wine. Bright light poured from the living room, and the voices grew louder. It seemed a whole chorus of merriment was gathered there. I took a few steps, clutching the box of pastries to my chest, and was just about to walk in, shout, "Surprise!" and laugh with everyone. But then I heard Mom say my name. Her voice was strangely light, almost mocking. "I tell you, Melissa is incredibly stupid." A general laugh erupted. I was stunned. Something inside me snapped and my ears were pounding. My mom? Stupid? I stood in the hallway, my back pressed against the wall, afraid to move. "She does everything we tell her," Mom continued. "Like a puppet. It's almost too easy." The laughter intensified. Someone even slapped the table. I felt a cold shiver run down my spine. The words hit one after another, sharp like shards of glass. "Remember how we convinced her not to sell this house?" Dad chimed in, his voice cheerful, self-satisfied. "She was almost decided on selling and buying an apartment in the city, and we told her a touching story about family memories. And bam, the house stayed ours. Now we can come whenever we want and she can pay the mortgage." "That girl has no backbone at all," Mom added with a sneer. "None at all." The room erupted in laughter again. My vision swam. The air felt thick. I couldn't believe this was happening, not in someone else's story, but in my real life. "Oh, you have to hear this," Emma said cheerfully. "I regularly ask Melissa for help with rent. I just call, say things are terrible, and she agrees right away, every time." "How much does she give you?" someone asked. "Usually around $800, Emma replied. "Sometimes more if I complain convincingly enough." Laughter, loud, free, as if they were discussing a joke. I stood, unable to move. My throat tightened. It seemed if I breathed in now, some animalistic sound would tear from my chest. Not a scream, not a cry, but something in between. "And remember," Aunt Carol joined in, "how 6 months ago I told Melissa I urgently needed dental surgery. $2,000, I said. She just transferred the money the next day. Didn't even ask for a bill, nothing." "And what did you spend it on?" Mom asked. Carol laughed. "On a new furniture set. That sofa, is just magnificent. You could say Melissa updated my living room." Everyone laughed even louder. The laughter rolled through the room like a wave, reflecting off the walls like a mocking echo. I pressed my back against the cold wall of the hallway. The box of pastries trembled in my hands. My temples were pounding so hard I could barely hear their words. The world narrowed to a thin tunnel where every word was poison. "Yes," Mom continued, already through laughter. "Melissa is kind but terribly naive. Sometimes I think she wouldn't even notice if we asked her for the house itself." A new explosion of laughter. I stood, turning to stone. Everything inside me seemed to burst, like a thin glass shell under which years of love, patience, and devotion had accumulated. These people, for whom I had kept the house, worked without rest, helped, were now standing in my living room and laughing at me, at my kindness, at my trust. And suddenly Uncle Mike spoke. I recognized his voice immediately, loud, slightly hoarse, with that very shade of self-satisfaction that always irritated me at family gatherings. "I have a story about our generous Melissa, too," he said, his voice deliberately cheerful. "Last year, she thought my car had broken down, and of course, she offered to lend me $1,500 for repairs." He chuckled, and the sound felt like a blow to my temple. "I bought myself a fishing boat instead. A great thing, by the way." Laughter rolled through the room again. Someone even clapped their hands. Inside me, everything snapped. With each of their remarks, a piece of faith in these people, my family, chipped away like plaster from an old wall. All these years, I had sincerely tried to help them, believing I was doing good. I thought I was supporting the family, and they were just lying, using me. But even that wasn't the limit. Soon I heard George's voice, Trevor's father, calm with a slight sneer. "You know," he said, "it's rare to have a Melissa in the family. It's always nice to have someone with money who's willing to share it. It's like having your own personal bank on hand that never asks questions." "Exactly," Mom responded. "A real walking ATM. And the best part is she doesn't even expect the money back, just gives it out, like a charity fund." "Well," Dad said, "we have to make sure this stream doesn't run dry. Can't let her suddenly get smart and start saying no to us." The room exploded with fresh laughter, and then Mom, in a more animated tone, added, "Speaking of which, I was just thinking about our next big request. Emma and Trevor are probably going to get engaged soon. Right, Emma?" "We've already talked about it," my sister replied, her voice soft, a contented purr. "Trevor has already been looking at rings." "Wonderful," Mom said, and her voice rang with determination. "When it happens, we'll convince Melissa that she has to pay for the wedding. I think we can get 10, maybe 15,000 out of her. If we do it right, even more." "And how do you plan to convince her?" someone asked. "Carol, I think." "Easy," Mom replied. "We'll say that's what families do. She's successful, she has a good job. Let her help her younger sister have the perfect wedding. The main thing is to make her feel guilty if she even thinks of refusing." Glasses clinked, loudly, as in a toast, and someone, I couldn't tell who, said with a laugh, "To stupid relatives with money." And again, laughter, loud, unrestrained. Then Mom added, as if putting the final point, "And of course to Melissa, the gift that keeps on giving." I stood in the hallway, my back pressed against the wall, clutching the bag of pastries to my chest. My heart was beating so hard I was afraid they would hear it. Everything around me spun. Voices, laughter, the clinking of glass, as if the room had suddenly plunged into a nightmare. These people I loved, whom I helped, they all thought I was an idiot. They didn't just use me, they made a habit of it. Memories flashed before my eyes. Mom hugging me gratefully after I paid for her treatment. Emma sobbing into the phone when I transferred her money for rent. Aunt Carol saying I was the family's kind angel. All those scenes where I felt needed, where my heart filled with warmth, had now turned into a mocking farce. They never saw kindness in me, only naivety, stupidity, convenience. The world around me became alien. I could barely feel my body, only the weight of the bag in my hands and a sharp, cold burning in my chest. It's over, I thought. Everything I believed in had collapsed. Carefully, Trying not to make noise, I turned and headed for the front door. I had to leave, immediately, before they realized I was here. My hands were shaking so badly the keys jingled as I reached for the lock. I held my breath, slowly opened the door, and stepping onto the porch, felt the cold air hit my face. Step by step, I moved away from the house, feeling a heavy, dull pain rising in my throat. When I reached the car, I put the bag of pastries on the passenger seat. The box tilted slightly and one croissant slipped out, leaving a greasy stain on the bag. I started the engine. My hands were still shaking. At first, I drove slowly so as not to make noise, not to give myself away. The road leading away from the house was swallowed by the shadows of trees, and only the headlights cut a narrow tunnel from the darkness. I tried not to think, just drove, until the house disappeared from the rearview mirror, and with it, my entire former life. When I reached the city and entered my apartment, my legs seemed to give way, leading me to the sofa. I sank down and could no longer hold back. Tears streamed down, hot, shameless, long. I cried until the air cut my chest, until my eyes were dry with pain. The whole weekend passed as if in a fog. I couldn't bring myself to eat or leave the apartment. I sat by the window, replaying every word, every laugh in my head. Rage would rise in my chest, then despair would wash over me. Sometimes I picked up the phone, ready to call them, lay it all out, force them to explain. But each time I stopped my finger. No, too early. I had to wait, see what would happen next. They had talked about Emma's wedding, about how they would make me pay for it. Let them try. Let them show me to what extent they thought me a fool. Then I would answer. But not now. Now I needed time to pull myself together, cool down, become cold, to remember everything. I didn't have to wait long. Just 2 weeks later, on a Tuesday evening, my phone came to life, vibrating on the table, flashing with a familiar name, Mom. My heart jolted as if from an electric shock. I knew. The moment had come. "Melissa!" she exclaimed with delight, not even letting me say hello. "Oh dear, I have the most wonderful news." Her voice was high, sing-song, as if she were about to cry from happiness. I could almost see her animated face, flushed with imagined excitement. "Emma and Trevor are engaged," she continued. "Can you believe it? He proposed to her last night, gave her such a beautiful ring. Emma is just radiant with happiness." I forced myself to smile, though the corners of my lips twitched not from joy. "That's wonderful," I said in an even voice, putting in just the note of admiration she expected. "I bet Emma was thrilled." "You bet she was," Mom laughed. "She cried, screamed, laughed, all at once. We're over the moon. And so—" A businesslike tone crept into her voice, that special tone that always appeared before a request. "We decided to have an engagement party." I leaned forward, already knowing what would follow. "We thought we could have it at your country house in a couple of weeks," she said, as if in passing. "You don't mind, do you, dear?" I smiled, though everything inside me went cold. There it was. "Of course, Mom. The house is always at your disposal. For family, always," I replied with emphasized warmth, as if I had no idea what she was leading to. There was a short, thick pause on the other end. I could almost hear her gathering her courage, preparing to say the main thing. "Melissa, sweetie, there's one little problem," she began, and her voice became cautious, almost plaintive. "What is it, Mom?" I asked, knowing every word in advance. "We want to make this party truly special for Emma and Trevor, with good catering, flowers, decorations, maybe live music, but—" She made a theatrical pause. "We're a bit short on money right now." I had to bite my lip to keep from laughing out loud. "Oh no," I said in a tone of sincere sympathy. "That's awful." "I feel so awkward asking you, dear," she continued with feigned softness. "But to make it all work, we need about $5,000. Well, you know, the cake, catering, tent rental. I know it's a lot of money, but Emma only gets engaged once." I was silent for a few seconds, looking at the phone as if it were an object of ancient magic, radiating lies. Every word I heard was familiar, almost verbatim from the scene I had witnessed 2 weeks ago outside my house door. Everything was going according to their plan. They had no idea I was already playing this game, but by my own rules. 5,000, I repeated, as if seriously considering it. Yes, that's not a small amount. I know, Mom said hurriedly. But you earn well, dear, and Emma is your only sister. This is such an important day for her. I could almost see her sitting in the living room, clutching the phone, her eyes tracking every word, exhaling slowly, waiting for my usual agreement. Mom, I said finally, trying to make my voice sound tired but soft. I'd really like to help, but I don't have that kind of money right now. You see, I had to spend on apartment repairs. Everything's gone. The reserve fund is almost empty. A disappointed silence hung on the other end. I imagined her lips tightening, her gaze becoming sharp, assessing. But she quickly collected herself, and her voice became affectionate again. Well, what if we, your father, Emma, Trevor, and I, pay for everything now, and you just pay us back when you can? She suggested in a tone that seemed generous, as if she had just come up with a saving solution. I almost laughed. Perfect, predictable to the end. I drawled, pretending to think. Maybe that could work. All right, order what you want and I'll reimburse everything when I get my next bonus. A sigh of relief, almost a victorious exclamation, came from the other end. Oh, Melissa, you're an angel, Mom exclaimed. I'll organize everything tomorrow. I'll call the caterer, order the cake. It will be just wonderful. Wonderful, Mom. I'm looking forward to the party. I think Emma will be delighted, I said evenly. We exchanged a few more formalities and she hung up, leaving me in silence. I sat staring at the black screen of my phone and slowly shook my head. Everything was going exactly as I expected. They were sure they were playing the old game where I always gave in without a fight. It didn't even occur to them that I was now listening to them differently, coldly, attentively, with calculation. I had gone through all the stages of pain and resentment. Now all that remained in me was clarity, heavy as metal. They thought I was just a walking ATM that I would pay up again without checking. Well, let them think that. Let them weave their web, not noticing that I was no longer the fly. 2 weeks passed, enough time to think everything through thoroughly and turn their own game into a spectacle, where I was finally holding the strings. That Thursday, I called a locksmith. The voice on the other end was brisk, businesslike. I said I needed to replace all the locks in the house, on the front door, the back door, even the utility room and the shed. I wanted not a single crack of the past to remain open. We agreed on Friday evening, late, around 7. I specifically chose that time. By then the house should be empty, the family gone, and I, the mistress, reclaiming my domain. On Friday, after a long workday, I drove out to the country. Even from the turn onto the familiar gravel road, I noticed flashes of light. The house was sparkling with garlands like a huge festive cake. When I got out of the car, ringing laughter, music, and the sound of a hammer came from the open windows. Someone was hanging another banner. My family was there. All of them. They were working, decorating, showing off, taking pictures, preparing the venue for the celebration that was supposed to be the triumph of their own deception. The house looked dazzling. Golden ribbons hung from the porch railings. Lanterns glowed along the path. Folding tables with white tablecloths and vases awaited on the lawn, already filled with fresh greenery. They had really put in the effort. For a moment, brief, almost painful, a feeling of pity stirred in me. Not for them, but for my former self, the one who had once believed that such scenes meant love. I almost felt sorry for what I was about to do. Almost. The locksmith arrived right at 7, as promised. His name was Frank, a stout, good-natured man with tired eyes. He didn't ask unnecessary questions, just worked quickly and precisely, changing the locks one after another. When the last key turned in the new cylinder, I felt as if the air in the house had finally changed. Something inside it, and inside me, had become different. "All done, miss," Frank said, taking off his work gloves. "The new locks are reliable. No one with the old keys will get in." "That's the point," I replied quietly. After Frank's van disappeared through the gates, I was left alone. Twilight was creeping over the property. The garland lights shimmered in the darkness, winking at me mockingly. I walked through the house, carefully examining every detail: boughs, banners with "Congratulations" written on them, boxes of glasses, neatly arranged napkins. Everything was perfect. Everything, not for me. I started taking down the decorations, one by one, slowly, methodically. I tore off the ribbons, pulled out the pins, lowered balloons bouncing against the ceiling into large black trash bags. The monotonous sound of rustling plastic drowned out everything inside. I worked calmly, without rage, as if clearing away someone else's set after a play. When it was all done, the house was empty, quiet, real again. Mine. I carried the bags out back to a spot where they would be visible from the driveway but wouldn't obstruct the view. Let them see the shiny remnants of their celebration piled up like trash. Then I got in the car and drove back to the city, leaving behind the dark silhouette of the house and what had lived in it before. The next morning, Saturday, I sent Mom a message. "Hi, Mom. So sorry, but I can't make it to the party. Caught a cold. Don't want anyone to get sick." The reply came only an hour later. Short, cold, almost automatic. "Okay, Melissa, get well." That was all. No "poor thing." No "do you need anything." Not even a polite "hope you feel better." Just indifference, with a hint of relief. It really was easier for them without me. I spent the morning calmly, ordered pizza, made coffee, turned on the TV, and waited for the show to start. By evening, I even felt a strange lightness, as if I were observing an experiment where the result was known in advance. Night fell slowly. The clock showed around 2 when the phone suddenly came to life. Mom flashed on the screen. I looked at the call, smiling. For a long time, as if watching an old comedy where I knew every line. Then I just sent the call to voicemail. A minute later, Dad called, ignored again. Then Emma. Then Mom again. The phone vibrated on the table, alive. Messages poured in one after another. After 20 minutes of continuous buzzing, I picked up the phone and opened the chat. "Melissa, we're at the house, but the keys don't work," Mom wrote. "The locks are different." "What's going on?" Dad added. "Melissa, why aren't you answering?" Emma. "We can't get in. This is crazy. The keys don't fit at all." Melissa. I put the phone aside and let them worry a little more. The pizza was hot, the coffee strong, and the thought of the whole family standing at a locked door, clueless about what to do, brought a strange satisfaction. I imagined Mom fussing, Dad irritably checking the keys, Emma calling Trevor, who, blushing, suggested breaking a window. They argue, accuse each other, and all this chaos revolves around one fact: the door behind which there was no more room for their lies. After about 30 minutes, I finally picked up. "Melissa, thank God you answered." Mom's voice was on the verge of hysteria. "We're at your house, but we can't get in. Everyone is here. Me, Dad, Emma, Trevor, his parents, even the caterer with the food. We're standing on the driveway like idiots, and the doors won't open. What's going on?" "Strange," I said, taking a slow sip of coffee. "What do you mean, strange?" Mom was clearly trying to stay calm, but her voice already held irritation, a fine tremor like a taut string. "Is something wrong with your locks?" "On the contrary, they're fine," I replied. "I just changed them yesterday." Such silence fell on the other end that for a second I thought the connection had been lost. Only the faint rustle of wind somewhere in the speaker and Mom's breathing, which had become heavy, uneven. You changed the locks?" she finally repeated, as if not believing what she heard. "Why did you do that?" I chuckled. "Well, probably because I didn't like you calling me a fool a month ago." Silence in the receiver again. I could almost see her tense up, the wheels turning frantically in her head. What exactly had I heard? How much? When? Who was nearby? "You all had a good laugh then," I continued calmly, discussing how stupid I am, how I always do what you say. Like a puppet. Mom did what she always does when she feels she's losing control, switched to a sweet sing-song tone that used to make me shiver and now made me nauseous. "Melissa, sweetie, I think you misunderstood. We would never say anything like that about you. You know we love you." "Really?" I said. "So you didn't say I was incredibly stupid and that you could pull any scheme on me because I always bite?" "Of course not," she exclaimed hastily. "You must have misheard." "And Emma, I suppose, wasn't bragging about how she wheedles money out of me every month for rent, then spends it on a new sofa and teeth whitening?" Now the silence became thick, viscous, like thick syrup. Someone in the background started talking, muffled, irritated. Probably Dad or Emma asking what was happening. "Melissa," Mom finally spoke, now without the previous softness, "you're talking nonsense." "I heard the whole conversation, Mom," I interrupted. "Every word. About me being a walking ATM, about you planning to make me pay for Emma's wedding, and about you toasting to stupid relatives with money." This time the silence lasted longer. I imagined them standing on the driveway, phones pressed to their ears, the cold wind rustling around them, and their own bewilderment reflected in the windows of my house. "Listen, even if you heard something like that," Mom began uncertainly, "you have to understand that we're just joking. It was a joke." I laughed, loudly, sincerely. "A joke? You call it a joke to take money from me for years, make me pay for your every whim, and then laugh at me behind my back? You think that's funny?" "We're family," she almost shouted. "Family helps each other." "Family," I repeated, "should indeed help. But what you're doing isn't help, it's theft." Emma's screech came from the other end. "Give me that!" she yelled. Then, her raspy breathing in the receiver, nervous, erratic. "Melissa, you're acting like a complete fool. Everyone is here. We decorated everything, the tables are set, the food has arrived. You're ruining my engagement." "Actually, Emma," I said calmly, "I already took down all your decorations. They're in trash bags by the corner of the house. You can take them and get off my property." "You can't do this to me," she wailed. "This is my special day." "Your special day, which you expected me to pay for while laughing at how naive I am. Yes, that's exactly what I'm doing." "We'll break the door down," she screamed. "No, you won't," I cut her off. "I have cameras and an alarm system. If anyone touches my property, I'll call the police, and you'll all be arrested." A choked sob came from the other end, then a thud. Mom had taken the phone again. "Melissa, please." Her voice was trembling now, but not from remorse, from fear. "Can't we just talk? Let us in and we'll sort this out like adults." "There's nothing to talk about, Mom. I already understand everything. You showed me who you are yourselves." "But we spent $5,000 on this party," she shouted, losing the last of her composure. I couldn't help but laugh again, quietly with a kind of relief. "And who asked you to? I told you I didn't have the money, but you decided to spend it anyway, counting on guilting me later. Hoped I'd pay it back, huh?" "That was your choice, Melissa," Mom growled, now almost sobbing. "You're being unfair. We're your family." "You're right," I said calmly. "You are my family, and that's what makes it even worse." I took a deeper breath than necessary, as if gathering not strength but resolve, and said firmly, without hesitation, as if every word had long been carved inside me, waiting for its time. "You know what, Mom? Get off my property. Take the food, your guests, your cheap toasts, and your pathetic excuses, and don't come back." She responded quietly, almost in a whisper, as if hoping it would sound tender, as if a thread could still be stretched between us. "You don't mean that," she said, but fear already rang in her voice, like an old glass before it cracks. "Absolutely serious," I replied. "I will no longer be your ATM, your perpetual life boy, your convenient wallet with a soft heart. I am no longer your naive daughter or your stupid sister who pays for everything and believes everyone. I am done with you." I hung up, turned off the sound, and let the silence fill the room like water over smooth glass, slowly, calmly, without splashes. I spent the next hour watching through the cameras as they scurried around near the house, confused, irritated, as their noisy voices gradually gave way to hollow silence. They collected the remnants of their celebration, as if gathering the shards of a shattered illusion. The caterer packed the food back into the truck. Emma sobbed, her face in her hands. Trevor stood nearby, shoulders slumped, not knowing what to say, and his parents looked as if they wanted the ground to swallow them from shame. And, watching it all, I suddenly felt a strange calm. Not gloating, not joy, just lightness. Let them be ashamed. Let them finally live, at least for a little while, what I had felt all these years. The next morning, Sunday, I was awakened by loud banging on the door. In the peephole stood my parents and Emma, red, angry, frantic. I opened the door, looking straight at them, without fear, without a smile. "What do you want?" I asked wearily. "We want to talk," Dad declared, and without waiting for an invitation, stepped inside as if it were still his territory. Emma threw up her hands. Her eyes were full of tears and fury. "You ruined everything!" she cried out, her voice breaking. "My engagement is destroyed, and it's all your fault." "Actually," I replied, "you ruined it yourself when you decided I was stupid enough to pay for your party after what I heard about you." Mom stepped closer, her fingers trembling. "You owe us $5,000, she shouted. "We spent that money because of you." I laughed so hard I had to lean against the wall. "No, Mom. You spent it because you thought you could make me pay. Because you always thought you could manipulate me like a puppet. Now see how it turned out." Mom paled, her lips quivered, and for the first time in a long while, I saw in her eyes not anger, not pretense, but genuine bewilderment. You did this on purpose," she forced out. "Of course, on purpose," I said calmly. "You claimed I was too stupid for cunning. Seems you were wrong. I just got tired of being your obedient fool." Dad stepped forward, placing himself between us, as if he still had the authority to set boundaries. "Until you apologize and return the money, we will not speak to you anymore." I looked him straight in the eyes and smiled lightly, as if hearing long-awaited news. "Perfect. That saves me the trouble of crossing you out of my life myself." I took a step towards the door and opened it wider. A draft swept through the apartment like the last sigh of an old era. "I don't want to talk to any of you anymore," I said. "And besides, you're not serious, are you?" "Absolutely serious," Mom said, but her voice broke. "Me too," I replied. "Absolutely serious. I won't give you another cent. I won't let you use me anymore. I've gotten smarter now." "Really?" She didn't answer, just looked. And in that gaze, for the first time, something resembling understanding flickered. "Get out," I said. They left in silence. The door closed behind them, and the silence returned to the apartment. This time, not as a burden, but as a liberation. 6 months have passed since then. I didn't sell the country house. Instead, I signed a contract with a real estate agency. They now rent it out to tourists for short stays. The income goes towards the mortgage, and this is probably the first time my house has been profitable, not a loss. I no longer hear calls, receive messages, or have to lie that everything's fine. Recently, I saw photos of Emma on Facebook. She did get married. A modest ceremony at a local church, a few people, no luxury, no ostentatious drama. I wasn't invited. Of course, I didn't send a gift. No card, no bouquet, no cold congratulations. I just scrolled on, as if past someone else's life. Sometimes mutual acquaintances say that my parents are trying to contact me, that Emma regrets it, that everyone was wrong. I smile but don't respond. I have neither the desire nor the need to go back to them. They've already shown me what they think of me. And you know what? I believe them. Now that they are out of my life, I've become calmer, lighter, happier. For the first time in many years, I'm living not for others' expectations and not in exchange for gratitude I'd never get anyway. I'm just living. And it turns out it's wonderful to be yourself, without debts, without the label of a pushover, and without those who called your kindness stupidity. I'm not as stupid as they thought. I just let them think I was their fool for too long. Now, their fool is dead. I'm what's left. And that, perhaps, is the most honest beginning of my new life.